What is the price of a soul in a world where everything, even safety, has a price tag? 1% of the world owns half of its wealth, but what they don't tell you is how much of that wealth is built on the shadows they cast over the rest of us. This is the story of Elara Vance, a woman who went from being a hunted survivor on the brink of death to the captive queen of the most powerful man in the country. It's a journey through the highest penthouses and the darkest secrets. Flash forward to now. The penthouse is silent, bathed in the cold, blue light of the moon. Elara stands by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her breath hitching as she looks at the burner phone in her hand. It just received a text from the Shadow, the anonymous monster who ruined her life. The message reads, "I'm closer than you think." Suddenly, a warm, familiar hand rests on her shoulder. It's Julian Thorne, her savior, the man who pulled her from the gutter and gave her a world of silk and gold. He whispers into her ear, his voice like velvet. "Are you okay, darling?" She looks at him, seeing the man she loves. But then, her eyes drop to his wrist. He's wearing a watch she's seen only once before, in a grainy video sent by her tormentor. The realization hits like a physical blow. The hero who saved her by day is the same villain who hunted her by night. But to understand how she got here, we have to go back to the beginning. 6 months ago, Elara had nothing. No money, no friends, and no place to hide. She was running from an abusive past that refused to let her go. She was a ghost in her own city, sleeping in bus stations and jumping at every shadow. Then came the storm. Rain lashed against the pavement as she collapsed in front of the Thorne Tower. She was ready to give up. She was ready for the end. But instead of the end, she found Julian. He was the golden boy of the tabloids, a billionaire with a heart of steel and a face like an angel. He didn't just help her up. He brought her into his world. He gave her a name, a home, and a sense of peace she thought was gone forever. The transition was intoxicating. From the freezing rain to 500 thread count sheets. From starvation to 5-course meals. It felt like a miracle. But in Julian's world, miracles are just investments. The romantic tension between them grew until it was a living, breathing thing. He was possessive, yes, but she mistook it for protection. He was intense, but she mistook it for passion. She thought she had found the one man who could keep the darkness at bay. But what you're about to discover will change how you think about success and safety forever. Because sometimes, the person who builds the fortress is the same one who wants to keep you prisoner inside it. Before we begin this incredible journey, welcome to the channel. I want to be honest with you. This video took hours to research, good hours to write, and quality hours to produce. Every detail you're about to hear was carefully verified and crafted to bring you the most compelling version of this story. If you appreciate that level of dedication, please hit the subscribe button. It truly means the world and helps me continue creating these in-depth stories for you. And before we dive into the first chapter of Elara's descent into the world of Julian Thorne, I have a question for you. Have you ever wondered what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who lose everything? Drop your thoughts below. Now let's look at the night everything changed. The night the savior and the villain became one. To understand the woman Julian Thorne claimed to save, you have to understand the girl the world tried to break. Before the silk sheets, before the penthouse, and before the fear that became her constant shadow, Elara Vance was a girl who believed in the simple power of hard work. She grew up in Cedar Ridge, a town where the primary exports were coal dust and broken dreams. Her father, Mark, spent 30 years at the local mill for $18.50 an hour, coming home with grit under his fingernails and a cough that never quite went away. They didn't have much, but they had a kitchen table where they shared stories, and a porch where Elara would look at the stars and wonder if they looked the same over the big city. Elara's ticket out was a partial scholarship to a state university 300 miles away. To cover the rest, she worked 3 jobs. She was the girl who studied organic chemistry during her lunch breaks at the diner and cleaned dorm hallways at 2 a.m. She wasn't looking for a savior back then. She was building her own fortress. She graduated with honors and a dream of working in architectural design. She wanted to build structures that would last forever. Things that couldn't be knocked down by a stiff wind or a bad luck streak. But then she met Marcus Miller. Marcus wasn't a billionaire. He was a fixer for a mid-level logistics firm. He was charming, he was attentive, and at first, he was everything Elara thought she deserved after years of scraping by. The red flags didn't go up all at once. They were small, almost invisible. A comment about her dress being too short. A helpful suggestion that she should stop seeing her friends because they were distracting her from her career. Within a year, the man who said he loved her had turned her life into a panopticon. He controlled the bank accounts. He installed tracking software on her phone for her safety. When she finally tried to leave, Marcus didn't just break her heart. He tried to erase her identity. "You're nothing without me, Elara," he told her the night she packed her only suitcase. "The world is a cold place. You'll be back on your knees within a month." She fled to the city with exactly $2,140 in a hidden shoebox. Every cent she had managed to siphon off over 6 months of grocery runs. She changed her name. She got a job at a small firm called Vanguard Designs. For 3 months she was winning. She was free. Or so she thought. While Elara was fighting for her life in the shadows, Julian Thorne was reigning over the light. At 32, Julian Thorne was the youngest person in the country to hit a net worth of $42 billion. He didn't just own Thorne Industries. He owned the skyline. From his 86th floor office in Thorne Tower, he looked down on the city like a chess grandmaster surveying a board. His life was a curated masterpiece of perfection. The $150 million Gulfstream jet. The custom-tailored suits that cost more than Elara's childhood home. The social circles that included prime ministers and tech titans. To the public, Julian was a visionary. A philanthropist who donated millions to urban renewal. But behind those obsidian eyes was a man who grew up in a different kind of poverty. An emotional one. His father, the legendary Silas Thorne, taught him one lesson. In this world, you are either the predator or the prey. There is no third option. Julian didn't just buy companies. He hunted them. He enjoyed the acquisition phase, the psychological warfare of finding a rival's weakness and squeezing until they surrendered. He was a man who had everything, which meant he was bored. And a bored man with $40 billion is a dangerous thing. The first time Julian saw Elara, it wasn't at a gala or a business meeting. He saw her on a security feed. Vanguard Designs was a tiny firm he was looking to acquire, not for its profit, but for its patents. He was scrolling through personnel files when he saw her headshot. There was something in her eyes. Not just beauty. Julian was surrounded by beautiful women who wanted his name. No, in Elara's eyes, there was a raw, jagged edge of survival. He didn't just want to hire her. He wanted to see what it would take to make that survival instinct snap. This is where the story takes a dark turn. The shadow began to haunt Elara just as Julian Thorne's interest in her peaked. It started with a single flower delivered to her desk at Vanguard. No card. Just a black dahlia. Then her bank account, the secret one, was drained. $2,140. Gone. Every cent she had saved to stay free vanished into the digital ether. Then came the messages. "I see you, Elara. You can't hide in the light." She thought it was Marcus. She was certain her past had caught up to her. Every time she walked home, she felt eyes on the back of her neck. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart stopped. She lost her job. Someone anonymous sent her boss photos of Elara from her time with Marcus. Bruised, broken, and framed to look like a drug addict. The firm couldn't have a liability on staff. Within 2 weeks, she was evicted from her studio apartment. The locks were changed while she was out buying a loaf of bread. She stood on the sidewalk with a single bag, the rain starting to fall, realizing she was exactly where Marcus said she would be. On her knees. She didn't know that 3 blocks away, in a blacked-out SUV, Julian Thorne was watching her on a high-definition monitor. He watched her cry. He watched her tremble. He watched the light go out in her eyes. He waited until she was at her absolute breaking point. Until she was so desperate she would view a cage as a sanctuary. The night of the collapse, Elara had been walking for 6 hours. She was hypothermic, starving, and convinced the shadow was right behind her. She saw the bright golden lights of Thorne Tower. It looked like a lighthouse in a storm. She made it to the steps, her fingers clawing at the cold stone, before her legs finally gave out. She didn't see Julian step out of the lobby. She didn't see the way he signaled his security team to stay back. He walked to her, knelt in the rain, and lifted her into his arms. For Elara, everything went black. But for Julian, the game was just beginning. He had successfully dismantled her world so he could be the only person left to rebuild it. He brought her to his private penthouse, a place no camera, no police officer, and no Marcus could ever reach. He gave her the best doctors, the finest clothes, and a promise. "You are safe here, Elara. I won't let anyone touch you." And in that moment she loved him for it. She worshipped the man who saved her. She didn't realize that the shadow who had drained her bank account, the anonymous person who got her fired, and the villain who had driven her to the brink of suicide, was the same man currently tucking her into a bed of Egyptian cotton. He had spent $1.2 million on the surveillance and the ops to ruin her life, just so he could spend the rest of it saving her. It's the ultimate paradox of power. Julian Thorne is her knight in shining armor by day. He's the one who holds her when she has nightmares about the shadow. He's the one who tells her she's beautiful when she feels broken. But at night, when she's asleep, he goes into his private study. He opens the encrypted laptop. And he sends the next message that will keep her terrified, keep her dependent, and keep her running, straight back into his arms. It's a world of absolute luxury built on a foundation of absolute terror. Elara is living a dream that is actually a meticulously crafted nightmare. And the question isn't just if she will find out. It's what she will do when she realizes the man she loves is the monster she's been running from. If you were born into Elara's circumstances, losing everything and being hunted by an invisible enemy, do you think you would have made the same choices? Would you have trusted the first person who held out a hand? Let me know what you think in the comments. Next, we're going into Act 2, The Gilded Trap, where we'll see exactly how Julian manages to play both the hero and the villain without ever getting caught, until a single mistake changes everything. The first 48 hours in the Thorne penthouse felt like a fever dream. Elara woke up in a bedroom that was larger than her entire childhood home. The walls were upholstered in silver silk, and the floor was heated Carrara marble. It was a $60 million sanctuary in the sky, designed to make the rest of the world look like a smudge of gray. Julian was there when she opened her eyes. He didn't loom. He sat in a mid-century velvet chair, reading a leather-bound book. He looked like the hero every woman is taught to wait for. "You're safe, Elara," he whispered. "The doctors said it was exhaustion and stage 1 hypothermia. But you're under my protection now. No one gets into this building without a retinal scan. No one reaches you unless I say so." For the first time in 3 years, Elara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She wept. Not out of sadness, but out of the sheer crushing weight of relief. She reached for Julian's hand, and he took it. His grip was firm, steady, and though she didn't see it then, entirely unyielding. But the honeymoon phase of a rescue mission is short-lived when the rescuer is also the captor. As Elara regained her strength, her natural drive returned. She was an architect by trade. She didn't want to be a decorative piece in Julian's collection. She wanted her life back. On her 4th day, she sat Julian down over a breakfast that cost more than her monthly rent at the diner. "Julian, thank you for everything," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But I need to go to the police. I need to report the person who's been stalking me. And I need to find a new job. I can't stay here forever." Julian didn't blink. He just sipped his black coffee, a rare $200 per pound blend, and looked at her with a chilling sort of pity. "The police can't help you, Elara. We checked. The shadow you described? They've scrubbed every digital footprint. To the law, he doesn't exist. If you leave this tower, you're walking back into a firing line." He reached into his pocket and placed a matte black credit card on the table. "This is a secondary account. It has a $50,000 monthly limit. Buy clothes. Buy books. Buy whatever makes you feel like yourself again. But don't talk about leaving. Not yet." This was the first gilded handcuff. Elara felt a pang of unease. She was a woman who had worked 3 jobs to pay for tuition. Taking money for doing nothing felt like a betrayal of the girl from Cedar Ridge. But when she looked out the window at the city below, she saw a predator in every alleyway. She took the card. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in psychological conditioning. Julian was the perfect companion. He took her to private gallery openings after hours. He flew in a Michelin-starred chef to cook her favorite childhood meal, but elevated with truffles and gold leaf. He was charming, brilliant, and seemingly obsessed with her recovery. But every time Elara felt a spark of independence, the shadow would strike. It happened while she was browsing a job board on a secure laptop Julian had provided. A pop-up appeared. It wasn't an ad. It was a photo. A photo taken 10 minutes earlier of Elara looking out the penthouse window. The caption read, "A bird in a cage is still easy to hit." She screamed, dropping the laptop. Julian was in the room within seconds, holding her, comforting her, promising to double the security detail. He spent $200,000 that afternoon on upgraded thermal sensors for the perimeter. What Elara didn't see was Julian's thumb pressing a delete command on his phone as he held her. He was the one who took the photo from the building across the street using a remote-operated drone. He was the one who sent the message. He was feeding her fear to keep her in the only place he could control her. His arms. The catalyst, the moment the floor began to tilt, happened on a Tuesday. Julian was at a board meeting, or so he said. Elara, restless and feeling the walls of the penthouse closing in, decided to do what she did best. She started looking at the blueprints. Not the physical ones, but the architectural logic of the space. As a designer, she knew every building had a nerve center. A place where the wires met. She found a hidden door in the library, masked by a facade of mahogany shelves. She expected a wine cellar. She found a server room. It was freezing inside, humming with the sound of high-end cooling fans. On a central monitor, dozens of feeds were active. She saw the lobby. She saw the elevators. And then she saw a folder labeled Project Dahlia. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She clicked the folder. Inside were thousands of files. Her bank statements from 3 years ago. Her university transcripts. A log of every person she had spoken to at Vanguard Designs. And then a subfolder titled Expenditures. She scrolled through the line items. $5,000. Private investigator. Background check. Vance, E. $10,000. Dark web contract. Digital scrub. Vance, E. $2,500. Black Dahlia delivery. $50,000. Incentive for Vanguard Design's CEO to terminate E. Vance. The room felt like it was spinning. The shadow wasn't Marcus. It wasn't a ghost from her past. The shadow was the man who was currently paying for her silk pajamas and her therapist. Elara realized that her entire rescue was a scripted event. Julian Thorne hadn't found her by accident. He had hunted her. He had systematically destroyed her life, isolated her from her friends, and drained her resources just so he could play the role of the savior. It was a $42 billion obsession. Suddenly, the hum of the servers seemed to grow louder. She heard the distinct click of the penthouse's main elevator arriving. Julian was home early. She scrambled to close the folder, her hands shaking so hard she nearly knocked over the monitor. She slipped out of the server room and leaned against the library door just as Julian walked in, looking effortlessly handsome in a charcoal suit. "Elara," he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You look pale. Has something happened?" In that moment, Elara had a choice. She could scream. She could confront him with the truth and risk whatever Project Dahlia had planned for its final phase. Or she could do what she had learned to do in the coal mines of Cedar Ridge. She could bury the fire and wait. She looked at him and forced a smile, the most difficult architectural feat of her life. "Just a headache, Julian. I think I need some air. Can we go out tonight?" Julian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, darling. Anything you want." Elara was no longer a victim running from an anonymous shadow. She was a prisoner who had finally seen the face of her jailer. But how do you escape a man who owns the city, the police, and the very air you breathe? She had to decide. Would she try to run again and risk being destroyed for good? Or would she stay and play Julian's game until she found a way to take his empire down from the inside? At this point, Elara had to choose between option A, confronting Julian and demanding her freedom, or option B, playing the part of the perfect, grateful partner while secretly plotting her revenge. What would you have done? This decision would define everything that came next. Next, in Act 3, the counterplay, Elara stops being the prey and starts learning how to hunt a billionaire. But in Julian's world, every move is anticipated, and the price of a mistake is a life sentence in a gilded cage. The most dangerous thing you can do to a woman who has lost everything is give her a reason to fight back. Elara Vance was living in a $60 million nightmare, and the worst part was, she had to smile through it. For the first few weeks after discovering Project Dahlia in the server room, every day was a performance that would have put an Oscar winner to shame. Imagine waking up every morning next to the man who dismantled your life. Imagine feeling his breath on your neck as he whispers how much he loves you, knowing he is the same person who sent the messages that made you want to end your life. This was Elara's darkest period. The trauma wasn't just in the past anymore. It was in the present, sitting across from her at the breakfast table. The psychological toll was astronomical. She stopped eating. She lost weight. Every time Julian touched her hand, her skin crawled, but she had to lean into it. She had to play the part of the grateful, healing survivor. But Julian was a shark. He noticed the slight tremor in her hands. He noticed the way her eyes darted to the library door. To counter her growing suspicion, he escalated the shadow campaign. One night, while they were watching a movie in his private theater, Elara's phone buzzed. It was a message from the shadow. He can't protect you forever. I'm in the building. Elara looked at Julian. He was looking at the screen, seemingly oblivious, a bowl of artisanal popcorn in his lap. But she saw his thumb twitch over his own phone in his pocket. He was gaslighting her in real time. He wanted her so terrified that she would beg him to never let her leave the room. The financial crisis of her soul hit a breaking point. She had no money of her own, only Julian's black card. Every penny she spent was tracked. If she bought a bus ticket, he'd know. If she withdrew cash, he'd see the ATM location. She was a billionaire's guest, but she was poorer than she had been in the coal mines, because she didn't even own her own fear anymore. She spent nights in the bathroom with the shower running, just so she could cry without him hearing. She contemplated jumping from the balcony. It would be a 1,000-foot drop to the pavement, a quick escape from the gilded cage. But then, she remembered her father. She remembered Mark Vance coming home with coal dust in his lungs, saying, "Elara, the world will try to take your dignity. Don't ever let them have it for free." The resilience didn't come all at once. It started with a single, calculated risk. Elara began using the $50,000 monthly allowance Julian gave her, but not on clothes or jewelry. She started donating small amounts, $1,000 here, $2,000 there, to various architectural forums and underground digital rights groups under a pseudonym. She was testing the fences. She wanted to see if Julian was tracking her spending categories or the specific recipients. Then came the breakthrough. She found an old contact from her university days, Sarah, a brilliant coder who had once helped Elara bypass a campus firewall for a design project. Sarah was now working in cybersecurity for a rival tech firm, Ethereus. Elara knew she couldn't call Sarah from the penthouse. Instead, she waited until Julian took her to a high society charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. The event cost $25,000 per plate. While Julian was busy charming a senator, Elara slipped into the ladies' room and used a burner phone she had bought with cash she'd slowly skimmed from grocery runs. "Sarah," she whispered, her heart thumping against her ribs. "I need a ghost. And I need a way to kill a god." Sarah didn't ask questions. She knew Elara, and she knew the rumors about Julian Thorne's intense private life. They began to build a digital backchannel. Elara would feed Sarah data from the Thorne server room whenever Julian was out of the penthouse, and Sarah would look for the one thing Julian Thorne couldn't buy, an exit strategy. The struggle was exhausting. Elara was working a double life. By day, she was the beautiful recovery story on Julian's arm, attending board meetings and smiling for the paparazzi. By night, she was a spy in her own home, crawling through air vents to reach the server room, her fingers flying across keyboards as she mirrored his drives. She learned the true scale of Julian's depravity. Project Dahlia wasn't just about her. Julian had a dozen projects. He was using his wealth to acquire people like they were distressed assets. He found people at their lowest points and manufactured their salvation to ensure their eternal loyalty. He was building a private army of people who owed him their lives. And Elara was meant to be the crown jewel of that collection. Do you think Elara should have confronted Julian the moment she found Sarah? Or was she right to stay in the penthouse and keep playing the spy? It's a choice between immediate safety and long-term justice. Share your perspective below. While Elara was building her case, Julian's rivals were starting to smell blood. Etherius, the company Sarah worked for, had been losing contracts to Thorne Industries for months. Their CEO, a man named Arthur Sterling, was looking for a way to take Julian down. Sarah hinted to Sterling that she had a source deep inside Thorne Tower. The parallel developments were shifting. Julian thought he was playing a game of cat and mouse with a broken woman. He didn't realize the mouse was inviting other cats to the party. But Julian wasn't a billionaire by accident. He felt the shift in the air. He noticed Elara's newfound calm. He mistook it for submission, but a small part of him, the predator part, remained suspicious. To test her, he set a trap. He told Elara he was going to London for 3 days for a merger. He left her the keys to his private office, something he had never done before. "I trust you now, Elara," he said, kissing her forehead. "Don't prove me wrong." He wasn't going to London. He went to a safe house 3 blocks away to watch the hidden cameras he had installed inside the server room. Elara stood in the center of the library, looking at the door. She knew it was too easy. She knew the keys felt too heavy in her hand. This was her moment of truth. If she went in, she might get the final evidence she needed to destroy him. If she didn't, she might lose her only chance. She walked to the door. She put the key in the lock. And then, she stopped. She remembered the way Julian's thumb twitched on his phone. She realized that in this house, even the trust was a weapon. She didn't open the door. Instead, she spent the next 3 days in the library, reading books on 18th century architecture, never once touching his computer. When Julian returned, he was ecstatic. He thought he had finally broken her spirit. He thought she was finally his. He celebrated by buying her a $400,000 diamond necklace. Elara let him fasten it around her neck, even though it felt like a noose. She had passed his test. But in doing so, she had earned the one thing she needed most: his total arrogant blind spot. Elara Vance was no longer running. She was standing perfectly still, waiting for the giant to trip. And with Sarah's help, she was about to pull the rug out from under the entire Thorne Empire. We're at the midpoint of this incredible story. If you're still here, I genuinely appreciate you. This journey from victim to strategist is a long one, and I'm glad you're on it with me. What's kept you engaged so far? Is it the romance, the revenge, or the high-stakes world of the 1%? Let me know in the comments. Next, in Act 4, the revelation, the masks finally come off. The shadow is unmasked, the bank accounts are emptied, and Elara has to decide if she wants to be free, or if she wants to be the one holding the keys. Power is not a gift. It is a weapon forged in the fires of betrayal. By the time Julian Thorne believed he had finally tamed Elara Vance, she had already ceased to exist. In her place was something Julian's billions couldn't buy, and his algorithms couldn't predict: a woman with nothing left to lose and a blueprint for his destruction. The turning point didn't happen in a grand explosion. It happened in the quiet of a Tuesday afternoon, while Julian was finalizing a $4 billion acquisition of a satellite network. Elara sat in the sun-drenched library, ostensibly reading a vintage copy of The Fountainhead. In reality, she was listening to a sub-audible frequency through a custom-built earpiece Sarah had smuggled to her inside a gift from Arthur Sterling, a rare antique fountain pen. Sarah had found it. The kill switch. Julian's empire was built on a proprietary data mining software called Argus. It was the source of his wealth and the tool he used to stalk Elara. But Sarah discovered a flaw. Julian had hard-coded a backdoor into the system so he could bypass any board of directors or government oversight. If that backdoor were open to the public, Julian wouldn't just lose his money. He'd lose his freedom. But there was a catch. The encryption keys were stored on an air-gapped drive, a physical device never connected to the internet. It was kept in Julian's private safe, hidden behind a digital painting in his master study. Elara knew what she had to do. She had to stop being the spy and start being the predator. This was the moment she stopped reacting to Julian's moves and started dictating the board. She began her transformation. She leaned into the role Julian wanted for her with terrifying precision. She started taking an interest in his business, sitting in on meetings, and offering innocent insights that actually helped him close deals. She was becoming his most trusted advisor. "You've changed, Elara," Julian told her one night as they shared a $5,000 bottle of 1945 Bordeaux. "There's a fire in you I haven't seen before. It's intoxicating." He didn't realize the fire he was admiring was the one she was using to burn his world down. The escalating success of her plan was a series of quiet wins. Working through Sarah, Elara began to funnel information to Arthur Sterling at Etherius. She didn't give him enough to win, only enough to make Julian feel threatened. She wanted Julian off balance. She wanted him focused on a corporate war so he wouldn't notice the domestic one. As Julian became obsessed with Sterling's sudden insight into Thorne Industries' moves, he began to lean on Elara more. He gave her the codes to the inner sanctuary of the penthouse. He stopped checking her burner phones. He even stopped the shadow messages, believing the prey was finally broken and belonged to him. Elara was no longer the girl who collapsed in the rain. She was a woman who could discuss $500 million hedge fund strategies by day and decode encrypted security protocols by night. She spent her afternoons at the most exclusive boutiques in the city, but she wasn't buying clothes. She was building a network. She befriended the wives of Julian's board members. She talked to the invisible people, the drivers, the cleaners, the security guards. She learned that Julian's Project Dahlia wasn't his only sin. He had been suppressing a whistleblower report about a faulty infrastructure project in a developing nation, a project that had led to the deaths of dozens. The weight of the truth was heavy, but it gave her a new kind of peace. She wasn't just fighting for her own revenge anymore. She was fighting for every person Julian had crushed under the wheels of his ambition. She was building a reputation of excellence. To the world, Elara Vance was the billionaire's muse, a brilliant architect who was helping Julian Thorne modernize his empire. She even won a prestigious award for a new, philanthropic housing complex she designed for the company. Julian was so proud. He held a gala in her honor, spending $2 million on a single evening of champagne and ego. He stood on the stage, his arm around her waist, telling the elite of the country how Elara was the light of his life. Elara looked into the crowd and saw Sarah, disguised as a server. She saw Arthur Sterling, nodding to her from the back. The stage was set. But the final transformation happened within Elara herself. She realized she didn't want Julian's money. She didn't even want his blood. She wanted the one thing a man like Julian Thorne couldn't survive: irrelevance. The night before the Global Innovation Summit, the event where Julian intended to launch his new surveillance tech, Elara made her move. Julian was out at a boys' club dinner, feeling invincible. Elara entered his master study. She didn't use a hammer, she used her mind. She bypassed the retinal scan using a high-resolution contact lens she'd printed based on a photo she took of Julian while he slept. The safe clicked open. There it was. The air-gapped drive. A small, cold piece of hardware that held the fate of a $40 billion empire. She didn't take it. Not yet. Instead, she mirrored the drive using a portable device Sarah had designed. She put the original back, exactly where it belonged. As she stepped out of the study, the lights flickered. Searching for something, Elara? The voice came from the shadows of the hallway. It wasn't Julian. It was his head of security, Miller, a man who had been with the Thorne family for 20 years. Elara didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She stood her ground, the mirrored drive hidden in the palm of her hand. I was looking for Julian's heart, Miller, she said, her voice like ice. But I think we both know he doesn't have one. Miller looked at her for a long, silent moment. He looked at the study door, then back at the woman who had once been a broken ghost in their lobby. He remembered the reports he'd filed, the ones Julian told him to ignore. The ones about the people who got hurt so Julian could get rich. He's coming home in 10 minutes, Miller said quietly. If I were you, I'd be in bed by then. Miller stepped aside. The support from an unexpected ally was the final piece of the puzzle. Elara realized that even in Julian's world of iron and glass, there were cracks. And she was the one who was going to widen them until the whole structure collapsed. Julian returned home, smelling of expensive cigars and victory. He climbed into bed and pulled Elara close, never noticing the coldness in her touch or the way her eyes stayed open long after he fell asleep. The stage was set. The Global Innovation Summit was 12 hours away. Julian Thorne was going to stand before the world and claim to be its savior. And Elara Vance was going to be the one to show them the shadow. At this point, Elara has transformed from a hunted victim into a master strategist who is holding a billionaire's life in her hands. Do you think people can truly change their core nature under this kind of pressure? Or is Elara simply becoming as cold as the man she's trying to destroy? This is important for what comes next. Next, in Act 5, the final reckoning, we reach the summit. The lights go up, the cameras start rolling, and a single click of a button will change the world forever. Who stays standing when the towers fall? You can only build an empire on a foundation of lies for so long before the weight of the truth brings the whole thing down. The Global Innovation Summit was the crowning jewel of Julian Thorne's career. 5,000 of the most influential people in the world, CEOs, heads of state, and tech pioneers, filled the Grand Hall of the Metropolitan Convention Center. Millions more were watching the live stream. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. Julian stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his silk tie. He looked invincible. He was about to unveil Argus 2.0, a global security network he claimed would end crime forever. But Elara knew the truth. Argus wasn't a shield. It was a net. Elara stood beside him, dressed in a sharp, minimalist white suit. No more silk gowns. No more golden girl costumes. She looked like the architect she was, precise, structured, and unbreakable. You look stunning, Elara, Julian said, his eyes reflecting a terrifying kind of pride. After tonight, they won't just know my name. They'll know ours. We are the future of this country. Elara looked him directly in the eye. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. You're right, Julian. Tonight, everyone is going to see exactly what the future looks like. The lights dimmed. The music swelled, a deep cinematic pulse that signaled the arrival of a god. Julian stepped onto the stage to a thunderous standing ovation. The sheer scale of his power was visible in every flashing camera and every hushed whisper in the dark. He spoke for 20 minutes about safety, about the shadows that haunt the innocent, and how his technology would finally shine a light into the dark corners of the world. It was a masterclass in irony. And now, Julian projected, his voice booming through the $2 million sound system, I want to invite my partner, the woman who inspired the soul of this project, Elara Vance, to join me for the final demonstration. Elara walked out. The applause was deafening. Julian reached for her hand, expecting her to take her place a half-step behind him, the beautiful muse to his genius. Instead, Elara walked straight to the second podium. Julian talks about shadows, Elara began, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the fading applause. He talks about the fear of the unknown. He knows that fear intimately, because he spent $1.2 million of Thorne Industries funds to manufacture it. The room went deathly silent. Julian's smile didn't drop, it froze. It was the look of a man who had calculated every variable except the one that mattered. The human spirit. What are you doing, Elara? Julian whispered. His microphone still live. It was a hiss of pure venom wrapped in confusion. I'm showing them the demo, Julian, she replied. She pressed a button on the remote she had hidden in her palm, the one Sarah had synced to the hall's main server. The massive 80-foot LED screen behind them didn't show the sleek interface of Argus 2.0. Instead, it flickered and died. Then, a single file folder appeared. Project Dahlia. The crowd gasped. Suddenly, the screen was flooded with evidence. The logs of Julian's private servers. The GPS tracking of Elara's every move for the last 6 months. The recorded phone calls where Julian, using a voice distorter, had terrorized her as the Shadow. But it didn't stop there. Next came the financial records, the incentives paid to have Elara fired, the bribes paid to her landlord. Then the knockout blow, the suppressed whistleblower reports from Julian's failed infrastructure projects, showing the names of the people who had died so his profit margins could stay at 15%. The public nature of the moment was devastating. There was no spinning this. There was no PR firm on earth that could erase the image of Julian Thorne's private acquisition list being broadcast to the entire world. Julian turned to the screen, his face pale, the veins in his neck bulging. The golden boy was shattering in real time. He turned back to the audience, trying to find a friendly face, but he found only a sea of glowing smartphones recording his downfall. "This is a fabrication," Julian shouted, his voice cracking. "She's unstable. I saved her." Elara didn't need to say another word. The data spoke for her. She reached up and unclasped the diamond necklace, the $400,000 golden handcuff. She let it drop. The sound of the diamonds hitting the stage floor was caught by the microphones. It sounded like breaking glass. The consequences were immediate. From the wings of the stage, 4 men in dark suits appeared. They weren't Thorne security. They were federal agents, tipped off by Arthur Sterling and provided with the air-gapped data Elara had mirrored. As the agents approached, Julian's board of directors, the men who had worshipped him an hour ago, stood up and walked out of the front row. They didn't even look at him. In the world of the 1%, the only thing more contagious than success is failure. Julian Thorne, the man who owned the skyline, was led off the stage in handcuffs. He didn't go out with a bang. He went out looking small, huddled between agents, his $10,000 suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. Elara stood on that stage alone for a moment. She looked out at the lights, the cameras, and the chaos. She had expected to feel a surge of triumph, a burning heat of revenge. But as she watched the doors close behind Julian, she felt only a profound, cool sense of peace. She realized then that revenge wasn't the goal. Revenge would have meant staying in his world, fighting by his rules, and letting his darkness stain her soul. Justice wasn't about hurting Julian. It was about reclaiming Elara. She walked off the stage, through the stunned silence of the backstage crew. She didn't take the limo waiting out front. She didn't take any of the clothes or jewelry he had bought her. She had a small bag packed in a locker at the bus station. The same bag she had when she first arrived. As she stepped out of the convention center, the rain was falling again. But this time she didn't collapse. She opened an umbrella, looked up at the Thorne Tower, now a monument to a fallen era, and started walking. She was no longer running from a shadow. She was walking toward the sun. Her bank account was empty. She had no job. She had no billionaire protector. But as she inhaled the cold, damp air of the city, she realized she was the wealthiest person she knew. She had her name. She had her truth. And for the first time in her life, she had a future that belonged entirely to her. The shadow was gone. The savior was a memory. And Elara Vance was finally truly home. The confrontation is over. Julian Thorne's empire has collapsed, and Elara has walked away with nothing but her dignity. Do you feel satisfied with how this played out? Or would you have wanted Elara to do something different? Perhaps take the money, or stay to run the company herself. There's no wrong answer here. Share your perspective below. Stay tuned for the final epilogue, where we see where Elara is 1 year later, and the ultimate fate of the man who tried to own her soul. When the truth finally broke the surface, it wasn't a clean break. It was a demolition. For years, Marcus had built a reputation on a foundation of stolen credit and emotional manipulation. He thought he was the architect of his own legend. In reality, he was just a squatter in a house built by Sarah's sacrifice. The immediate fallout was a cold, silent vacuum. Within 48 hours of the board meeting revelation, Marcus went from the industry's golden boy to a social pariah. His phone, once a vibrating hive of deals and invitations, went dead. The investors didn't just pull their funding, they filed for an audit. When you build a business on lies, the accounting usually tells the same story. Legal papers were served in the lobby of his favorite steakhouse. It was public. It was humiliating. The very people who used to laugh at his jokes now looked at their shoes when he walked by. He lost the firm. He lost the penthouse. But most importantly, he lost the narrative. Marcus currently lives in a rented 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. He spends his days shouting into the void of social media, trying to rebrand as a victim of cancel culture. No one is listening. He is a king with no kingdom, haunted by the ghost of a woman he thought he'd destroyed. Drowning in the wake of his own choices, Sarah was finally learning how to breathe. She didn't just survive the scandal, she defined it. Her business didn't just grow, it evolved. She moved the headquarters into a building filled with light, a physical manifestation of the transparency she lived by. Last month, Sarah stood on a stage in front of 500 of her peers. She wasn't there as a survivor, or as Marcus's ex. She was there as the CEO of the year. When she accepted the award, she didn't mention revenge. She didn't need to. Her presence was the only statement required. New opportunities are pouring in. Partnerships with global firms, speaking engagements, and a seat on the very board that Marcus once tried to gatekeep. The most poetic moment? She recently purchased the old office building where Marcus first tried to sabotage her career. She didn't tear it down. She turned it into an incubator for female entrepreneurs. That is what full-circle vindication looks like. She isn't just successful. She is significant. Sarah often sits on her terrace now, looking out at the city skyline she once feared would swallow her whole. She thinks about the version of herself from 10 years ago, the woman who cried in the shower so her kids wouldn't hear. She looks at that woman with so much compassion, but no pity. "I used to think he was the storm," she told a close friend recently. "But I realized I wasn't the house being blown down. I was the wind itself." She's learned that hardship isn't a detour. It's the forge. Every lie Marcus told, every attempt he made to dim her light, only forced her to find a source of power that didn't depend on him. She feels a strange, quiet gratitude for the pain. It sounds radical, even impossible, but she sees Marcus's cruelty as a gift. If he had been just okay, she might have stayed. She might have settled for a mediocre life with a mediocre man. His betrayal was the fire that burned away everything that wasn't her. It left behind a woman who is unbreakable because she's already been broken and chose to put herself back together with gold in the cracks. But what about the children? The ones caught in the crossfire? The kids aren't kids anymore. They are young adults with eyes that see far too much. Leo and Mia look at their father with a mixture of pity and distance. There is no anger left. Anger requires an emotional investment they are no longer willing to make. To them, Marcus is a cautionary tale. A map of where not to go. He spent his whole life trying to be big, Leo said during a family dinner. Mom just focused on being good. It turns out, good is much bigger. They understand the journey better than anyone. They remember the nights the lights stayed off. They remember the way their mother's hands shook while she typed out business plans at 2 a.m. Their pride in Sarah is a living, breathing thing. It's in the way Mia carries herself in her law school debates. It's in the way Leo treats the women he dates with a radical, ingrained respect. They have a wisdom that usually takes a lifetime to acquire. They know that a person's worth isn't measured by what they take, but by what they build after everything has been taken from them. They are Sarah's greatest legacy. Not the awards, not the revenue, but two human beings who are whole. So, where does everyone stand today, on this quiet Tuesday afternoon? Marcus is sitting in a coffee shop, trying to convince a skeptical consultant that his comeback is just around the corner. He looks tired. The charm that once opened doors now just feels like a desperate sales pitch. He is a man perpetually waiting for a tide that has already gone out. Sarah is in her office, but she's not looking at spreadsheets. She's looking at a photo of her children on their most recent vacation. She has a meeting in 10 minutes with a venture capital firm, but she's not nervous. Why would she be? She's already survived the worst thing that could happen. The business is thriving. The children are soaring. Her life is a fortress of her own making. Everything Marcus tried to steal, she reclaimed. Everything he tried to break, she reinforced. His silence in her life isn't empty anymore. It's peaceful. She didn't just win the war. She outgrew the battlefield. The camera pans out, showing the contrast between the flickering neon of Marcus's street and the steady, warm glow of Sarah's home. It's a story that makes you step back and look at your own life. We've watched this journey from the first spark of betrayal to this moment of absolute clarity. We've seen the price of cruelty and the long-term dividends of integrity. It feels like a resolution, but it raises a massive question about the way the world works. Looking at where everyone ended up, do you believe in karma? Or is this just the natural consequence of choices? Is there a cosmic scale that balances itself out? Or did Sarah simply outwork and outlast the chaos Marcus created? I want to hear what you think. Drop a comment below. Does everyone eventually get what they deserve, or do we have to go out and build our own justice? Success isn't a destination. It's a receipt for the price you were willing to pay. We often mistake wealth for the numbers in a bank account, but this journey proves that true riches are found in the things that can't be taken away. Marcus had the titles, the office, and the prestige. Yet, because he lacked character, he was actually bankrupt from the start. Sarah's story teaches us that your circumstances are just the weather. They might be stormy, they might be freezing, but they don't change your DNA. Resilience isn't just about hanging on, it's about using the pressure to turn carbon into diamonds. The most profound justice didn't come from a courtroom or a viral expose. It came through excellence. Sarah didn't win because she took Marcus down. She won because she built something so high that he could no longer reach her. If you asked Sarah today if she'd change any part of the struggle, she'd look you in the eye and say, "Not a single second." She views the betrayal now as a necessary surgery. It was painful, yes. It left scars. But it removed a cancer of complacency she didn't even know she had. Her advice to anyone currently sitting in the dark, wondering if the sun will ever rise, is simple. Stop looking for a ladder and start building a foundation. She's learned that true success is the ability to look in the mirror at night and respect the person looking back. She has changed. The woman who once sought permission now grants it to herself. She's softer where it matters and steel where it counts. She's learned that the only person you ever need to beat is the version of you that wanted to give up yesterday. The legacy of this struggle isn't just found in Sarah's business. It's written in the DNA of her children. Leo and Mia didn't just witness a comeback. They witnessed a masterclass in human dignity. They saw that hardship isn't a reason to become bitter. It's a reason to become better. This experience has prepared them for a world that isn't always fair, giving them a psychological armor that most people don't acquire until middle age. The generational pattern of power through manipulation has been broken. In its place is a new blueprint. Power through integrity. They are entering the world with a promise. They aren't looking for shortcuts because they saw how the shortcut destroyed their father. They aren't afraid of the climb because they saw their mother scale a mountain with a weight on her back. Their futures are bright not because of their inheritance, but because of their instincts. There is no champagne being popped for Marcus's downfall. Sarah doesn't feel a surge of triumph when she hears his name. She feels a quiet, measured sense of observation. It's the way you look at a natural phenomenon, like a tree that fell because its roots were too shallow to support its height. She realizes now that Marcus wasn't a villain in a grand epic. He was a man who made small, hollow choices until there was nothing left inside him. His opinion of her, which once felt like a life sentence, now feels like a whisper in a hurricane. She has found a peace that is deeper than forgiveness. It's indifference. Marcus didn't determine her destiny. He just provided the friction she needed to gain traction. The journey is complete because he no longer has any power over her emotions, good or bad. So, what does this mean for you watching this right now? It means that your current setback is not your final score. It means that integrity is the only currency that never devalues. We live in a world that screams at us to measure our worth by external standards, by what we own, who we know, or how fast we can climb. But the real power lies in the transformation. It's about loving yourself enough to stay the course when everyone else has written you off. It's about understanding that the gift of your enemies is often the realization that you never needed them in the first place. Character is your destiny. Your choices are your legacy. And as Sarah's life proves, the most beautiful things are often built from the rubble of what we thought was the end. Think back to where we started. We saw a woman silenced, a mother sidelined, and a partner betrayed by the person who was supposed to be her greatest advocate. We watched Sarah endure the cold isolation of Marcus's ego and the calculated theft of her own brilliance. But the turning point wasn't just a single board meeting or a legal victory. It was the moment Sarah decided that her worth was not up for debate. This wasn't just a story about a business rivalry. It was an evolutionary arc. From the shadows of manipulation to the bright, unapologetic light of self-actualization. The emotional resonance of where she stands now, surrounded by the love of her children and the respect of an entire industry, is the ultimate proof that truth doesn't just survive, it eventually commands the room. This journey is significant because it's a mirror for all of us. It matters because Sarah's experience isn't an isolated event. It's a universal battle between the hollow pursuit of status and the enduring power of substance. It reminds us that while the Marcuses of the world might win the first few rounds with noise and mirrors, they lack the stamina that only integrity can provide. This story offers a visceral kind of hope. It tells you that your pain is not a waste of time. It tells you that being the good person isn't a weakness. It's a long-term strategy. It's a reminder that resilience isn't about bouncing back to who you were. It's about exploding forward into someone you never thought you could be. I want you to take a piece of this story with you into your own life. Whatever struggle you are facing right now, whether it's a career setback, a betrayal, or a voice in your head telling you that you aren't enough, look at Sarah. Your circumstances are a chapter, not the whole book. They do not define your worth, and they certainly do not dictate your finish line. Let this be your encouragement. The work you do in the dark when no one is clapping and you feel completely alone is exactly what will sustain you when you finally step into the sun. Don't seek revenge. Seek growth. Build something so solid that the people who tried to break you become nothing more than a footnote in your biography. If this journey moved you, inspired you, or taught you something valuable about resilience and success, please leave a like and share your biggest takeaway in the comments. I read every single one, and your insights make this community special. Your voice is the final piece of this story. Remember, you are not defined by what others think of you. You are defined by how you respond when life tests you. Sarah proved that the best response to cruelty isn't revenge. It's building a life so beautiful that your critics become irrelevant. Their noise can't reach you when you're standing on the peak of your own potential. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and never let anyone convince you that you're nothing. You're everything you choose to become. I am the Storykeeper and I love you all.